change the culture, the mindset, the expectation level, and improve the brand of Indiana Hoosier football.
And we're back, Brad. We are back.
A long hiatus, and I'm wearing Indiana gear for once while recording these, and not a different school.
Yeah, no, this is a big step for you, actually. It's good for the listeners to know.
I'm starting to take it serious. Watch out.
Yeah, in truth, we went to record on, Tuesday, and I plugged in my mic, and my mic didn't turn on. So I had to order a new cord, go through that whole ordeal, but we're back. We're back. The audio's there.
It's been so long. But yeah, it's the off season. Things have
that
happened,
is the truth.
but
we literally sat down. No. We
Yeah.
sat down to record. We clicked record, and my mic wasn't recording my audio. I was like, that's weird.
It's true, but that was after an already long hiatus.
Okay, that's fair.
It's the off season.
Yeah, it is. It is the off season, but I'm glad we did wait a couple days, because then we would not have been able to talk about CJ West and his performance he just put on at the combine. I know you tweeted about it, but he ran a sub 540 for a man that's 6'1", 316 pounds. That's just absolutely insane.
Yeah, definitely a good number for him going into it, because I would, that's just a really good number. And I'm looking at all the other D tackles, like he finishes in the above average pack, but not number one by any means, but still a really good number for him at 315, 6'3". I think he's starting to get day 2 buzz, so looking good for him. It's looking like he's going anywhere from round 2 to round 5 at this point, so very exciting times for him.
I saw a stat that said he was like 120 something all time out of like 1,800 defensive tackles that weighed in at his weight to run that fast or something, whatever. He was in the top 8% for his athletic profile all time.
Yeah, and it's starting to look, as we go through the NFL process and we start speculating which Hoosiers will get drafted. It really looks like it's going to be Rourke and West for sure, maybe Wettig, and then the rest of the guys might go undrafted. Maybe, a guy like Terry Jones sneaks up, but I feel like there's a lot of Terry Joneses out there. So it's a leg up from the NFL. And yeah, I'm just rooting for all the guys. I do think they're all going to get their shots, and typically guys on good teams, even if they end up going undrafted, end up having great careers, because they're big, they know what winning's like, and they do all the little things right, and they get on these rosters and kind of work their way up. So even if they don't get drafted, it's not the end for any of these guys. But for CJ West, it's looking like he's in for a big payday coming up, getting a good rookie contract.
He's made himself a lot of money, and I think my favorite unintended or residual byproduct from this is that people are going to leave the combine and go, holy shit, I have to watch more CJ West. So what are they going to do? They're going to put on CJ West tape. Well, CJ West tape is Indiana tape. And so by proxy, they're going to be watching everybody else on the defense. They're going to get a lot of Aiden Fisher. They're going to get a lot of Jalen Walker. They're going to get a lot of Jones and Asbury, and they're going to see Pons flash on, and Kamara, and by watching West and what he's doing, they're going to get a shot to watch what the rest of the Indiana defense was doing off of that. And it was a really impressive year from these guys. So just the fact that more eyeballs are going to go on CJ are just going to bring more eyeballs to Indiana's defense as well.
Yeah. And I think what bodes well for him is the fact that he was on a winning team, coming off. I think if NFL GMs were to just discount guys that were on losing teams and only draft the guys that are on winning teams, I think their hit rates on draft picks would improve tremendously. So as teams that probably evaluate that strategy a lot, like the Eagles, who draft a lot of champions, and the Lions draft a lot of champions or highly successful college players, and they seem to find success. So I hope he lands in a great situation on a contender, because I think they'll find a lot of value in him right away.
Yeah, I also do like that landing spot in Carolina for him. I kind of like what the coaching staff is doing and the different vibe they got going on. They started turning around at the end of last year in a good defensive culture traditionally. So he has been kind of linked to them since the Shrine Bowl. So we'll see
if he lands there.
Yeah,
if they're at, because they're probably planning on taking him at a spot. So there's a chance he's not at that spot because there's a team that's already pretty sold on him because of his tape and the fact that he's probably the most NFL ready guy on one of the best defenses in the country. So yeah, a lot boding well for him.
The other Indiana Hoosier at the Combine, Brad noted Curtis Rourke, most likely getting drafted. What he's most likely not going to do is be performing at the Combine because obviously he had knee surgery in December. So I would be pretty stunned if he's able to turn around this quickly and be able to do drills. But he spoke to the media, today, I think, actually. Just kind of talking about when they found the injury. So the interesting nugget here is they didn't find the tear when it happened. So he thinks it happened sometime early in fall camp, and then he just was able to play through it, so they didn't think anything of it. Turns out he was playing on a torn the whole time. So honestly, kind of an interesting nugget there that the team they didn't know he was playing hurt. So that's actually kind of crazy.
That's why it was kept under wraps so well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Remember we talked about that at length.
Wow,
what a huge testament to this Indiana team. They all knew, and none of it leaked. And turns out only Rourke's inner thoughts suspected of it.
Yeah, kind of crazy.
Yeah,
kind of crazy. But yeah, we're gonna keep you updated, especially on the Twitter account with Combine updates and stuff that are happening with the guys and things like that. But we are kind of in that dead period. But there, like Brad said, it has been a little bit since we've talked, and so there has been some news and some things that have happened. The first of which, D'Angelo Pons was announced as an on-3 preseason All-American for next season. Obviously, we have thought that he is that caliber of player, best corner in the Big Ten, best corner in the country, we've been saying. To see him get this level of recognition this early in the offseason is a testament to just how good of a player he is, how hard he's worked, and how he's viewed nationally. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I think obviously he has tons of production, and as well as being one of the few top production guys at the position, he's one of the few true sophomores. So when you project what's he going to do next season, you're going to project him a lot better than those incoming seniors. He's got a lot more upside than a lot of those guys, so I don't think that's going to be the last you see him. I'm calling my shot now. He's going to be a Phil Steele, Athlon, preseason All-American. He's going to get all the billings.
Love it. Do you want to do?
He's going to get the spotlight for this Indiana off-season hype train that's going to start forming whenever those preseason, probably post-draft and those preseason, post-spring, those preseason guys start dropping, and then all these pundits find their teams and start talking about it come June. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see which national voices latch on to Indiana coming up in year 2. Did you want to do an official visits update today, or do you want to hold off because there's last time we spoke, there was I think 12 guys who had scheduled officials. I think now that number is closer to 20 or 30. So it was a significant increase. I don't even know if we can track down everybody.
Okay, yeah, there's definitely been an uptick in official visits scheduled. The most recent one will be April 25th. So I feel like we should maybe save those till, kind of the week they happen going into the off season. Yeah.
Per post-spring game. All right, cool. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because it is a little tough to wrangle who's going where. Because they're still flying left and right, and they will be as we approach the end of the year. But spring game is April 19th. Pack the Rock, get your tickets for that. It's going to be televised. I believe it's on the Big Ten Network. There's been a slew of teams canceling their spring games with the fear that other coaches can watch their guys play and then offer them more money. If you have a team that's secure in their roles and you have good relationships with your players, then that really shouldn't matter at all.
I
But
warned
obviously,
you about making this point when
I
Cignetti cancels his his spring game, which I wouldn't
it,
blame him for one bit. Like I honestly like as much as I like the spring game, like I could see where the coaches are coming from, especially in this era where it just might go away. Like at the end of the day, the spring game is kind of more of a publicity stunt to get hype traction for the team. It's not really necessary these days with all, just the fact that there's all these podcasts out there like ourselves that are very passionate about these teams. Like they're going to get the hype train going at every year no matter what, really, as long as you're winning. So there really isn't any point in having a spring game unless you're in like year one as a head coach trying to unite the fan base again. But when you're in a spot like Indiana, I wouldn't. I consider us one of the big dogs, and if Texas and Ole Miss are canceling their spring games, I wouldn't hate the move personally. And it's nice to see them play on spring. I remember covering it last year, uh, but I don't think it'd be the worst thing for it to go away. It is kind of a sad thing, but it's just the reality of the situation. And to kind of call out back to the official visit stuff real quick, I do want to call out there's 30 scheduled, and most notably, we do have one 4-star scheduled to come on June 20th, Cameron McAney from IMG Academy. So long
yeah,
tangent there, but I just want to make sure
he's
that
an indie guy.
information's out there.
But yeah, that's funny. I actually tweeted about that because, like, obviously, if you're paying attention to the level we're paying attention to, when IMG Academy pops up, you start looking in different directions, right? So I was like, the IMG pipeline to IU is open. Like, this has never happened without Cignetti. I had a couple people in my mentions be like, we actually hired their coach to be our tight ends coach a couple years ago, and then I did some digging, and there's Nick James played on for Tom Allen, I think, in 2023. So I wouldn't call it a pipeline. But no, anytime you see a school like IMG and you start to approach that upper echelon of high school football, like the IMGs, the American Heritages, and I'll go with the Florida schools, but the Boscos and the Bishop Gormans and the powerhouse schools, it's like, there's a reason why those high school teams are good all the time, because they have good players. So go get guys from them and you're going to be pretty good.
Yeah, typically those high schools continue to pump out really good players. It hasn't ended. Mater Dei has been doing it for about 30 years now. So, there's plenty of schools out there like it. I would love to get some De La Salle, Mater Dei, Bosco, some Gorman. I'd love to get some Orange Lutheran guys, some Servite guys, Loyola guys maybe. We'll see. Would be awesome to get, some Long Beach Poly kids one day wearing cream and crimson. It's Big Ten country, so it's fair game.
Hey, the boys can dream. It does. Not to go too far on a recruiting tangent, but after watching the staff go out and recruit for a year, it really does seem like obviously they want to create a big footprint in Indiana. That's a given. But Ohio, they spend a lot of time in. Northern Kentucky, they spend a lot of time in. They spend a lot of time in the Atlanta metro area, in Georgia in particular. And that kind of seems, and a lot of time in the Nashville area in Tennessee too. So that kind of seems like, and Illinois as well. Like that. Not quite Chicago, but like almost like just outer rim of Chicago, Illinois, like power high schools is kind of where they're spending a lot of their time.
Yeah, and it also seemed, I want to call out the DMV, Virginia area.
Oh yeah,
it seems like that's where a lot of guys that Cignetti built James Madison through was through that area. So I'd expect that to continue just based on all the relationships he has there.
No, they're there too as well. And LeBron Bond from that area, they're also on a 2026 or 7 or there's a lot of good motions happening on the recruiting trail, but they're all over Virginia as well. So I don't know how far west it's going to reach without adding somebody to the coaching staff that's got a significant connection to the West Coast, but yeah, a lot of these like bigger Southeast, Northeast, Midwest high schools that produce a lot of these power football players, like Indiana's going to start showing up on those sidelines, and it's not just a joke anymore. Hoosiers Connect is rolling. Aiden Fisher pod dropped early last week. Mikhail Kamara's Hoosiers Connect exclusive. If you're not a subscriber or a member of Hoosiers Connect, you won't be able to get the Kamara pod. I would imagine at some point they probably do release that to the public, but it's worth it. It's if you're looking for a reason other than to support Indiana athletics to subscribe and to be a member of Hoosiers Connect, like this Mikhail Kamara pod is phenomenal, like fantastic, a must listen. Can't say enough good things about it. And then Mackenzie Holmes sat down with Chloe Moore McNeil. That podcast is phenomenal as well. So shout out to Hoosiers Connect. They're doing great things. And yeah, the pod game's flying.
Yeah, Lady Huey's starting to figure it out. They're going to sneak into the tournament, and I don't know. Terry Morin has great success in that tournament. So
yeah, it was a little tough to watch him not be able to pull it out last night. It was, senior night for Sid Parrish and for Chloe, but like this. Their team is so much fun to watch. They play with so much heart, so much passion. They're well coached. Yarden Garzone is one of the best scorers in the country. And, yeah, they're going to be really good again next year too. But, yeah, they're a really fun team to watch and definitely a team given the age of their best players and their the play of their guards, especially Chloe. Like, yeah, that's a really good team.
Yeah, they still have a lot of key pieces from the teams of past. No, I guess Garzone's really came into that star role that was left by Grace Berger and then Mackenzie Holmes. So she's kind of taking that torch. It'll be fun to see them. It'll be fun to have two teams in the tournament potentially this year. We'll touch on men's later.
Yeah, we're gonna hold off. Indiana basketball is coming. Brad and I, if you didn't check it out, we wrote a big board. Obviously, I'm gonna hold off on the Indiana basketball stuff, but we're gonna talk about Indiana basketball in a little bit. No, we're gonna get to it, but we're gonna hold off. Vinny Fiacable, the last remaining member on the Indiana football roster from the class of 2021, announced he's entering the transfer portal. Obviously, he didn't get a ton of playing time this year, but from all accounts, you saw a lot of guys on Twitter, including Carter Smith, come out and express like how much like he meant to the program and how good of a teammate he was and the type of person he is. And so it obviously sucks losing a guy like that. But when you're looking to upgrade the roster in different ways and you're up against that scholarship barrier, to have a scholarship open up is really valuable in terms of roster building. But at the same time, you have to lose somebody who's so valuable to the locker room, so it's a double-edged sword. But I just thought that was interesting that the last remaining member of that class, the last year that we were in school, is no longer on the roster anymore.
Yeah, it's just continuing the trend of older guys that aren't going to play or going to end up leaving, and to fill in more spots to bring in more young guys as you continue the funnel of, as those young guys get older, and they're not getting playing time, they're going to leave, and we're just going to keep the cycle going. It's just a part of the business. It's tough to see a guy that, a senior leader. I think he's made enough impact to where, guys can carry the torch and be like Vinny, be teammates like he was, and he led by example to a point to where they can carry that over, and his impact will be felt in Indiana in its small little but very impactful way.
Speaking of Carter Smith is the 8th ranked returning tackle according to PFF, and I believe he's the number 1 returning left tackle in the Big Ten.
Yes, correct. Number 1 in the Big Ten. More notable than number 8 nationally, because you don't see them play. If he's ranked, he's legit if he's number 1 in his conference, because you're just comparing him to guys that he also sees in that conference, right? So, yeah, big time. I mean, we knew this. We already knew this. So,
we did know this. Also, this is what I wrote, and when I told you this the other day, you're like, I don't know what this means, but I had a point here. The Indiana weight room was getting a lot of love the past couple weeks. Like, videos and stuff have come out. And first of all, I can't believe we didn't do this when we were talking about CJ West, but shout out to Derek Owings, the strength and conditioning coach, and the entire strength and conditioning staff that's working with the boys in the offseason and during the season. Those guys are phenomenal. If CJ's performance at the Combine is any indication of the work they're doing here, that it works, and makes you want to lock in as a player because you're seeing what somebody did, you're doing the same thing and results translated for them. It's like, yeah, screaming endorsement for those guys too. But yeah, they came in and like the story from Pat McAfee where it was like, yeah, this weight room isn't going to work. Like, we need some money. They put $1 million into the weight room and it looks gorgeous. It's beautiful in there. And it's like, you can't see that and then not want to go work out in there if you're any type of athlete.
Yeah, I want I want a weight room where guys are motivated to go in, keep the snack bar open, keep you know just have all the facilities open so those kids can get in anytime they need to, and that's really the main thing. Just make sure everything's there for them to be successful, and that's what they're just going to continue to do. It's like a it's like everything they do is just like the right thing. So just
No, yeah, it seems stupid when you say it out loud. It's like, yeah, like have the weight room look cool so people want to be in there. It's like, yeah, of course, obviously, but that wasn't what was happening.
yeah.
Like recruit good players on good teams and then put them in a good position to succeed. It's like, yeah, that sounds pretty
Yeah,
fucking
and then
great, right? It's like,
have the the worse older guys like leave the team because they're not going to be making an impact to leave room for younger guys to step up and give them opportunity.
yeah, just play
It's
the
common
games and
sense.
win, guys. Like what's go like just win the games,
Score more
guys. Like
points
what
than the other team, you know?
this isn't very like it is crazy. No, you're right. They literally do things like you just like it's textbook. It's almost like if you want to run an organization, do it exactly like this. If you just do these things over and over again, you're going to be successful. It's like they're really successful.
Yeah. And most of it's money related, which I think are we going to announce Pam Whitten, her
Yeah, that was
extension?
next.
Are you
Yes.
serious? What a transition.
Yeah. What a
I don't-
transition,
for
Brad.
those
That
who
was
don't know,
incredible.
I don't have the list in front of me, so this has been a live reactionary from me this whole time. So yeah, Pam Whitten. Speaking of investment, she gets her. She got a raise and a 5-year extension as president of the United States. I mean IU. And she is yeah. It was an 8-1 vote with the one not vote for no being one of my old professors, Vivian Winston.
One of our old professors.
Oh yeah, everyone. I feel like everyone in the
And
Kelly school
everyone in
took.
every single person in the Kelly School of Business had Professor Winston.
So
Listen,
shout out Winston.
she has her reasons, and you can go
Yeah,
look into those. She spoke about them, but it's like,
yeah,
listen, 8-1, $900,000 is the new salary for President Witten, and when you look at the turnaround for Indiana football and the amount of money that's going to end up bringing the university and the way they were able to galvanize the fan base, like, yes, that is very deserving of a raise. Like,
yeah.
they could have announced it yesterday and saying like we agreed to it and didn't tell anybody. I still wouldn't care. Like she deserves it and more. Like what Pam Whitten and Scott Dolson have done for Indiana football deserves statues, let alone raises.
She was the way she explained it was very. I thought made sense. She basically just said I was down with the raise, but in terms of the extension, I just felt like more discussion was needed there. So she just wasn't ready to move forward, and that's why she voted no.
Yeah, listen, I think
That's fair.
if you were in class with Professor Winston, you should have a level of respect for her and the way she goes about things and the way she teaches, and so to see like she always has an informed opinion, and so even if you disagree with her, you take the time to listen to what she has to say.
Yeah, she's on the board for a reason. I don't think we're not saying she deserves any hate, but
No, God
yeah,
no,
she was just.
absolutely
It's just
not.
funny that it was one of our professors that
It is funny.
voted no.
Speaking of Indiana football, they set a lot of records this year. It was the highest scoring team in Indiana history on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, they allowed the least amount of points, the lowest offensive output. Simply put, it was the best football season in Indiana history. And one of the coolest things that I've ever seen an Indiana coach do, Kurt Cygnar gave over an hour of his time. He met with the students in the auditorium. He spoke for a little bit. He answered questions. He did a pregame interview. Like it was a lot of great quotes came out of it too, including like there was nothing that could take me away from Indiana. And yeah, it was really cool to see him like get in front of the students and be like, no, this isn't just like a one-hit wonder. Like actually my favorite quote was like, you guys really just expect the standard to be beat Purdue. And he was like pissed off about it. He was like annoyed about it. He's like, no, that's not good enough. Like the standard is not just beat Purdue. The standard's be a really elite football team. And we're going to beat Purdue as a byproduct of being a really good football team. And so it's like, yeah, let's keep adjusting these expectations because we have a standard here, and the standard has been raised.
Clearly, are these stats based on like game total, like seasons, or because they played like the most games that any IU teams ever played? So I could see the scoring output being a factor here, but the fact that their defense was the lowest point total, like, is that ever? Like, in even like the 1900s where games were going 6-0, or
The stats are on Indiana football's Twitter page. I don't have them sitting in front of me. I just wrote them down. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, ever, and you can stat correct me if you want to.
shout out stat corrections.
Shout out to stat corrections for the real ones.
Yeah. Still impressive though.
Do you have any
Regardless.
takeaways from it's Mookie making another appearance in the pod? Any takeaways from Cygnar speaking to the students? First of all, I would have killed to go to that event as a student. I
would have gone.
The posters they gave out were incredible too.
Yeah, I'm just glad that he's doing stuff like that because I don't remember Tom doing that after like his 2020 year, which was really successful. So it's just good to kind of see it done right, and it's not really something that I've really thought of much before. I don't know how much Nick Saban had to do this when he was early, or other like a Bill Snyder maybe when he was at Kansas State. But I think it's just an overall good strategy when you're interacting with your fan base consistently.
100%. And I think obviously as much influence as Saban had in Cignetti's coaching career, there's like completely different people with completely different styles. And so I think this is very on brand for Cignetti, who's not only building up Indiana football, but in doing so, building his own brand as well. And they're pretty much synonymous. And so when his brand grows, Indiana football grows. And so to keep being out there, keep being the face of your program, you know, at the end of the day, like, people are attracted to that. And so, yeah, I love everything the guy's doing.
Hence the name of the podcast.
Exactly. Bringing back Hoosiers Connect again. Speaking of centers for Indiana, Pat Coogan signed with Hoosiers Connect.
There we
He's
go.
official, locked in. Obviously, he was coming to school, but he locked in for an NIL deal with Hoosiers Connect, so we love seeing that. And then the last thing I have written down for Indiana football is Jamie Jordan's been writing some awesome shit. He does the IU reactionary. His stuff's phenomenal. Go check him out. He did a write-up on Ademola Ajani the other day, who I've been really high on for a long time. So, yeah, shout out to Jamie. Check out the IU reactionary.
Me and Jamie need to. I know Jamie listens. We need to compare two deeps. So we just need to get together sometime and just DM me and we'll get together. We'll figure it out.
We'll get something in the works. We'll definitely get something in the works. And then yeah, let's me and you, Brad, collaborated on something that wasn't Indiana football for, I believe, the first time ever.
What did we
Technically,
do? Collaborated about what? Basketball?
We created a big board.
Oh yeah. So you're saying I thought you just said we collaborated on Indiana football for the first time.
No, something that wasn't Indiana football.
Oh. Yeah. No, I think that was the first time. I mean, we've talked about basketball on this podcast before briefly. I think we spent about 20 total minutes of this podcast on it. Yeah, so it was kind of fun to, obviously Woodson announced his retiring, which he might be using as a fake ploy to get the team to start playing loose, which would be absolutely genius, which is exactly what they needed. And then, like, basically getting all the distractions out of the fire talk, and yeah, it just changed the whole narrative by announcing that, which I'm just gonna assume it's true, which is why we made the big board. I mean, it makes sense too. He's old.
No, I have a bunch of thoughts on it, and because I think you're right to at least bring up some sort of conspiracy of which, like, whether or not there is validity to this, because the timing of the announcement, which I wrote about yesterday for Key Sports Network, was definitely to quell the anti-Hoosier sentiment building within the fan base with Dusty May and Michigan coming in, and it did exactly that. You didn't hear we want Dusty or fire Woodson. That didn't happen. It also really hasn't happened for the last couple of weeks. I think everybody's kind of come to the realization that no, it's, even though Woodson hasn't said anything specifically, he's done. And I I do have to admit, I was one of those people, not publicly and outwardly, because I don't like to just spew these types of opinions out there because I don't think they help anybody. But I can't say I wasn't sitting here going like, I wish he would come out and say something, at least acknowledge the fact that they had this level of conversation and that this decision's happening. But at the same time, it's like you have Mike Woodson, who's a basketball lifer, taking a job at his alma mater, a place he loves, a place that he definitely has like really good relationships at, especially in the administration. And ultimately, this signals the end of his basketball career, and it also means that a lot of people that he thought had his back, for better or for worse, ultimately don't have his back anymore. And so there's a lot of different emotional things that are coming into play with this. And so just watching the way this team has responded to him, the coaching decisions, the ability to go to the 2-3 zone against Izzo, the lineup switch against Purdue, just the tenacity they're playing with on defense, the decision to put the ball in Trey Galloway's hands to be the primary offensive creator, take the pressure off Miles Rice, has allowed him to play more free. It's just like this team has looked significantly different. And while it's like, yeah, you can easily be frustrated with the amount of time it's taken for this basketball team to look this way, like there was 5 or 6 new guys coming into this team, including 4 or 5 guys they needed to rely on for really big minutes. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility that it actually just took them a little bit longer to gel, on top of the fact that they were dealing with a ton of pressure and they didn't have the right mix going. And there are arguments to be made about how engaged Woodson was. And so it's like when that announcement came, it was like, okay, everybody just shut up and let's get back to basketball. And like we're seeing a really scrappy, resilient, fun to watch Hoosiers basketball team, which is something nobody was saying 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and back to Woodson, like he's in position now with this turnaround to go to 3 tournaments in 4 years. So definitely leaving it better than he found it. Definitely on the upswing, and we were going through all these coaches too and their resumes and stuff. Like a lot of these guys really didn't hit their stride until like year 5, especially in these rebuild situations. They didn't really hit their stride until like year 8, year 5. Talking about Scott Drew here, like they didn't really.
Yeah, Bruce
it's
Pearl
not like
as
this
well.
happened overnight. I mean, Bruce Pearl got to Tennessee and won right away, but Auburn was not overnight by any means. And I mean, the fact that he's been able to accomplish what he has at Indiana, which was off 4 straight, and be able to be in position to go to 3 and 4. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And to this team specifically, it took a while to gel because they didn't figure out like what the right rotation was for this team. Which for the most season we were saying, start one big, Renew or Mbako. When it seemed like when they played together, teams would go on a run, and because we'd just be too slow. And they made that adjustment only recently. Obviously, with injuries, they've had that happen throughout the year, but when they were both healthy, they both played together still. So they made that change recently. And then one of my things that was really telling out of the Purdue game specifically was the lack of Mbako minutes and how that really impacted the game for Indiana defensively to really hop on Purdue and mount a comeback because they were able to just figure out scoring from other people that weren't Mackenzie Mbako while playing really good team defense with Goody, Galloway, Leal, and Rice out there. And I think that's the way to move forward with those 4 guys playing the majority of the game, mixing in a little Renew and Ballo, and then picking spots for Carlisle and Mbako to kind of come in. Because at this point, it really looks like Tucker might be unplayable on the defensive end, but Mbako is just too valuable of a scorer to leave out of the rotation completely, which is something that if you've talked to me about Indiana is something that I've proposed in straight up just not playing Mackenzie Mbako, which I think has its benefits because he's such a good spot up shooter that's really hard not to play him, but he's such a net negative on defense where it's like he's damn near unplayable. So it really makes you consider. So as long as Rice, Leal, and Galloway and Goody are getting the bulk of the minutes, I think we'll be in a really good spot because those 4 have really honed in defensively, especially Miles Rice has really gotten with the program on that end of the floor. And I think it's honestly helped him on the offensive end. When you're in a rebuild, and this is kind of I'm alluding to a Mick Cronin rebuild at UCLA to where it's a program that's very offensive oriented. They didn't really know how to play defense coming into it. So when you have a team like that and you're bringing in these new guys that aren't with the defensive program, which is why continuity obviously plays such a big part in the tournament because those guys
Word of the day.
understand. They understand how to play defense in their system. Once Rice was able to figure out what he's supposed to be doing on defense, the game's just coming easy to him on offense. It's funny how that works. Like UCLA struggled very early with Mick Cronin with very talented players, 4-stars across the roster, and they were losing to Hofstra and Cal State, I think Cal State Fullerton, but once they figured out the defensive end of the guard, they figured out scoring. Like they have guys that can score. It's really about just honing on the defensive end, and then once you have that, the game really does come naturally. Once you focus on that end, because at the end of the day, they're Division I basketball players. They can score the basketball when they're comfortable. So as long as they're in a comfortable situation, they're gonna be okay. And I think they're finally coming into their own. And it just took a while because we weren't playing Leal. Now all of a sudden he's a 30-minute guy for us. So it's really funny how it's honestly like obviously Woodson didn't start out with the correct answer, but he figured out the correct answer in the end, and that I think deserves a ton of credit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head when you brought up his resume and going through. Like I brought a list of 25 coaches to Brad. Like most of them realistic. There was probably 10 to 12 names I took a lot of liberties on, but like we legitimately looked through 25 coaches. 20 coaches probably, let's call it.
25.
Like,
30 maybe.
There was
I threw some names in there in that list that you didn't include. You didn't have Rick Barnes, and I threw in Rick Barnes.
No. I had Rick Barnes in the he wouldn't say yes, but it would be funny category with Bill Self and and Painter and
they didn't make the cut. Even though Self toward the end there, while we were writing it, kind of made those comments about Kansas. And he didn't like his players or whatever. Like he's on some Mick Cronin shit. Like I hate it here. Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, is he gonna leave Kansas? So I don't know, something to keep an eye on. But he didn't make the big board. Is Bill Self, 100%. I'd say.
But real quick, right before we jump into the big board and kind of the psychology behind it, in looking at all of those guys, there were, like you said, so many instances where it was like 3-4 years, then you start winning. Like 3-4 years, big tournament run. 50 years, your championship year type. 6 year, 7 year, where you're just like you're established. The recruits coming in kind of know what you're looking for. You have it like it's just. And obviously with NIL and the transfer portal, and people say this all the time, like the landscape of college football has changed. You could build a winner very, very quickly. But like when you take a look back at and compare Mike Woodson's resume to like say Archie Miller, which some people were trying to do and say Archie was a better coach, it's like it's not even close. It's actually not even close when you look at the production. And then like Indiana was last 4 in on Lenardi's most recent bracket that came out today. Like he's got them right there. And this is a season where like people thought he was going to get fired mid-year.
It's funny because they're definitely benefiting from a very weak bubble, which is true. Both can be true. Like they're playing really well.
Can I counter you though?
Yeah.
Indiana was a preseason top 16 team in the country, and they're on the bubble. Does anybody want to see that team? Like Indiana can match up athletically with anybody in the country.
I will say there is correlation to preseason rankings and tournament runs. I will say that they're highly correlated. That's all I'm gonna say. If teams that are ranked in the top 16 make the top 20 preseason, make the field, because obviously there's a few in there that just don't make the field and absolutely flop, but of those teams, they tend to do okay in March.
Starts with guards. Trey Galloway's just been absolutely phenomenal.
Because sometimes you just play bad, but then you just out talent them. At the end of it, that's the difference.
All right, you want to get into the big board real quick?
Yeah, I know the names, but how are we going to do this?
I got you. All right. So here are the 25 names I initially brought to Brad.
No.
And they were split into two No, this is going to be quick, I promise. Okay. They were split into 2 categories. Category 1 was the list, and category 2 was not interested but would be funny. I'm going to start from the bottom of category 2.
Which is
25 up to 1.
Which is
category 2 is
happen.
not interested, but would be funny. More emphasis on the would be funny part. So I had 25 Shaheen Holloway, Seton Hall's head coach.
Ridiculous. He is Seton Hall. He's not even leaving. He's got to survive the Seton Hall job.
The obviously the only reason he's on the list is because he led St. Peter's to an upset win over Purdue. Right? Was it St. Peter's? No,
yeah,
Fairleigh.
It was
Fairleigh?
St. Peter's.
St. Peter's, Fairleigh,
Yeah.
one of those.
He's a former Seton Hall guard. Like, just not going to happen.
Jersey guy through and through.
If
he
even
type
makes
of
it
player.
through the Seton Hall job. I mean, he probably would take, like, he would be interested in the Indiana job and the fact that he's about to get fired at Seton Hall.
Number 25, Jake Diebler. He was a candidate, I believe, at one point or something. I don't even know. I think Ohio State was playing like really well at that point, and I was like, that'd be kind of interesting. Like, deep dive took him way off the list. 23, Rick Barnes, who actually surprisingly ended up making it pretty far into our cut. 22, Painter. 21, Hurley. 20, Self. 19, Greg Gard. 18, McCasland. 17, Jay Wright. 16, Shaka. And 15, Rick Pitino. And Rick Pitino was disqualified due to conduct.
I had to disqualify him. Keyser really wanted him on the list. He was close. He got cut at the same time, like, for the age thing, really, with Dana Altman, Rick Barnes, Rick Pitino. Like, these guys, regardless of, like, their off-field conduct, which is only really applying to Pitino, out of those three, Altman and Rick Barnes, those guys are just, they've had their runs. They're just a lot older. I don't think they're necessarily what Indiana would be looking for. But, I mean, we're not really in the room. Age hasn't really been brought up at all. So those are just interesting names to kind of think of, but I just don't see Rick Pitino leaving St. John's. I don't see Altman leaving Oregon. And Rick Barnes would probably be the most likely because he was looking at the UCLA job when Mick Cronin was getting hired in that cycle. But he's 5 years, 6 years older since then. So he's having a great time at Tennessee, but I think he's settled.
Yeah, I'm with you. Brad did have to talk me off the ledge with Pitino, and it's just because he's been so successful at so many different places that it's like if you're just looking to win immediately, and that's kind of the same thing with the Rick Barnes, why he was even included on the list in the first place, and why he even stayed on the list for as long as he did is because Brad's going, oh, he almost took the UCLA job. Like, he almost did. He was in the final three, and I'm like, all right, well, maybe we could play around with it. But a lot of this was essentially find the coaches in the country who have won the most, compare their resumes, and then look at the situations and figure out, okay, who's even likely to leave. And so, while, yeah, it would be hilarious if, like, Bill Self or, like,
Jay
Painter,
Wright.
like,
Jay Wright.
it's like, but it's like these guys really aren't that realistic. And then you have names like Brad said, like Dana Altman, like Kelvin Sampson's another guy who, like, literally sanctions at Indiana. Like, that's never happening. But when you start looking at the criteria of what they're looking for in a head coach, it's like he checks every box. But Sampson not on the list. Porter Moser is kind of like a wild card. Ben McCollum's another name we kind of briefly took a look into. But we settled on 10.
Yeah, with Ben McCollum, I think of the people not on the list, like, he doesn't really fit the criteria of what we're looking for specifically, like proven winner at the Power 5 level. He's definitely, if we're going to take a chance on the guy, like, definitely someone you can talk me into. But he's just not fitting the criteria for me. He's definitely a very hot name, and I love the fact that he's won 4 national titles at the D2 level. Love that. I mean, that's a guy I'm willing to take a chance on, even though he's only been at Drake for a year at the D1 level. So it'll be interesting to see. I think maybe 4 years from now, if we're looking at a coach again, could be time. Could be McCollum time. Hopefully he's not at a bigger place.
Yeah, it's funny. We actually, I've had more than a couple people mention, like, not this time in terms of, like, looking at younger coaches. Like, Josh Scherz is another name who just took the SLU job. And, like, yeah, for the next round of coaches, like, they could be looking at him as like, can we focus on can we just nail this one? Can we just get this one right and then not worry about who's next?
Yeah, it. I mean, we could take a chance on McCollum now. I think if Shirts and McCollum, definitely taking McCollum, just because he's won a championship, right? So, like, not only that, four, like they were a powerhouse. I think they won their conference 12 straight years, something like that, something ridiculous. Um, yeah, I like his resume. It's just not at the level in which I was specifically looking for because I feel like there's a lot of attainable options that have that Power Four experience. Because recruiting a Big Ten guy is much different than recruiting a D2 guy in terms of evaluation and things like that. Like there's a lot less room for error.
Yeah, I would 100%
And that,
agree.
and that was what
Although,
and that was the same problem Archie ran into. Was yeah, he was getting great
well,
players for a Dayton system, but for Indiana, it
yeah,
just wasn't necessarily going to fit the bill consistently to
yeah,
be
well, that was
competitive.
that was the most frustrating part about Archie was that he would put together these rosters that were missing two guys that would absolutely go and play at Indiana that he would just never go and try and recruit.
Yeah,
But we're not
it
talking.
was,
We're not talking about Archie.
yeah.
Number 10 on our big board, we had Eric Musselman. To be honest, we wrestled with this one. It wasn't like he's just too intriguing to be left off. He's won in too many different places. He's a great recruiter. He's a basketball lifer. No ties to Indiana, but like he's been throughout the NBA and college basketball. And it's like if you're going to talk about basketball histories and you look at USC versus Indiana, like there is no comparison. So he's intriguing in terms of a coach that fits the mold of winner, proven, multiple stops, multiple NCAA tournament runs, but he literally just signed a contract at
Yeah,
USC.
and I will say he's a great coach, can win right away at Indiana. I think he has, and that mostly comes from his NBA background, his ability to recruit for the now. I think his ability to recruit for the future and sustainably has a lot of question marks, hence his kind of falling off at Arkansas is kind of how that went down. And
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, they went to a Sweet 16 in his
yeah,
last
and
year.
then they won like 7 games the next year. Like they were
Didn't
really
he?
bad.
Yeah, but he left, didn't he, or no?
Yeah, that well after the 1 year he was bad, which is where those sustainability question marks kind of come into play. Like why were they making the Calipari move? That you have a guy like Musselman who's proven to be a good winner. Making if you're consistently going to the Sweet 16, that is successful tournament coaching because once you get to the Sweet 16, if your expectation is to go to the Elite Eight every year, you're just delusional. It takes a special group, and that's like kind of perfectly, and then all the luck goes your way too. Like you just have to have all the perfect combination of whatever matchup you draw, like to get to expect Final Four and even just that's why just going to the tournament every year consistently is really just the baseline and kind of what we're looking for. Not so much like for me personally, like how far you go in the tournament isn't necessarily as important as getting to the tournament because I think your ability to get to the tournament shows enough consistency to where you will eventually make your long run. Sort of like how Matt Painter, it took him a while, and he, was losing all these high seeds, and then he had that one team, and they were able to finally make that run and break through, go all the way to the national title game. So it's that's kind of what you got to look for. You can't really look too much into. Obviously, it's impressive if you're going like obviously Tom Izzo makes the list, right? Because not only he goes to the tournament consistently, but he also goes far, and that's what makes him a great coach. But it's his ability to go be in that situation consistently that allows him to be successful. Because he's lost in the first round to a 15 seed before. It's happened. It happens all the time. It's nothing against Tom Izzo. It's that's just what happened. Middle Tennessee State was someone they maybe should have taken a little more serious, and they played great that day. And that's just what happens because it's basketball. Sometimes the ball just goes in for the other team for no reason. That's just what it is. So I'm just not like I think consistently making the tournament is the biggest criteria for me when I'm looking at a coach. And Musselman fits the bill. He's able to go 2 straight years at Nevada, go to 3 straight Sweet 16s at Arkansas. My big red flag is the sustainability. He hasn't been out of place more than what 6 years. So yeah, that'd be my biggest question mark for him. But yeah, I think he's very well qualified. I think I mentioned in the article I didn't like his whole like must bust thing, but maybe that's something that maybe I'm wrong in the fact that that's a lot like Cygnetti, and how he kind of operates his program. So yeah, I don't know if Musselman will necessarily be able to need need to do that in Indiana, but right now I think is kind of a good time to go for someone like that potentially. Even though
And
typically I would stay away from that, but for Indiana right now, the they need something to rally behind in this basketball thing because they're so divided.
yeah, I think that's one of the big issues with the current state of the program is that the fan base is so divided and that there is so much like inner hatred where it feels like the next guy coming in is going to have to like broker a peace treaty, sit down at like center court and like have both sides stand on each side of the gym and have a leader step forward and negotiate. It's like it feels like it's getting to that point. But all of that changes if you just are rallying behind one guy in unison, which is why like there's a guy we're going to get to in a little bit who would be a really interesting choice based on some of the relationships he has that are coming to light. But I think it's also important to note the mindset that we attack this with is that right now it's way too early in the we're not even at conference tournament season. Like it's so early to go after a sitting head coach of another university that it would be insanely disrespectful for Indiana to be like announcing who's next. And it would be, even though I'm sure things are going to leak out as conversations start to happen, it is insanely disrespectful to even start having these conversations. And so the goal of this wasn't to have a list of 10 guys and in that order, number one's most likely to be the next head coach of Indiana. The goal was to have number one most fit the guidelines that Pete Thamel said Scott Dolson's looking for. That's proven winner, goes to the NCAA tournament, sitting head coach, and can consistently compete for a Big Ten championship. And so that's how we attack this list. And that's why this guy, number 9, made the list, even though he really doesn't have a ton of NCAA tournament experience. I actually had to fight tooth and nail to put him on here, and so I'll argue for Chris Collins at number 9. Yes, he hasn't had a lot of NCAA tournament success, but he's also been the head coach of Northwestern for his entire career. It's not exactly a place that is resource rich. It's not exactly a university that is easy to get talent to. And I just think like if you're going to try and elevate somebody to give them more than they already have and provide a good coach with the resources necessary to put together a championship roster, I think you have to start and go, okay, who are the good coaches that would get the biggest upgrade? And Chris Collins has to be on that short list.
Chris Collins has the only 3 tournament wins in program history. He's also never lost in the first round in the tournament, so when he gets in, he wins.
I also have personal nightmares about Boo Buie.
He's done it at Northwestern.
I have personal nightmares about Boo Buie as well, and anytime you can recruit a kid like that and have him stay 5 years, like that just bodes really well for your ability to build a program. So I think it's just, again, if you're going to not go after some of the other names on this list and you're really just going to try and identify the best possible coach who would have also the largest upgrade in situation, like Collins becomes a really, really intriguing option.
Yeah, I'm less of a Boo Buie guy. I'm more of a Bryant McIntosh guy. Think Vic Law too. Why not? Those guys were good. I don't hate Chris Collins. Obviously, I just emphasized how making the tournament consistently is something we look for. I would say 4 Northwestern standards, 3 out of 10 is not that bad. Not that bad. So he barely makes it, which is why he's 9. And yeah, I think it's definitely a guy like to consider. That type of that type, the Chris Collins type. It's Chris Collins, obviously the best one.
The Chris Collins type, the best Chris Collins type is Chris Collins. That's print it, put it on a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Number 8 is Brad Brownell, the other Brad, as people are saying. He's the current Clemson head coach. Obviously wouldn't be a crazy flashy hire, but if you're looking for consistency, you're looking for somebody who's winning recently. Clemson has been really good the last couple of years. They're in ACC contention this year. They're a top 20 team in the country, at least the last time I checked. And he's an Indiana guy. He played high school basketball with Calbert Cheaney. He's got ties to the state. And, he's like you say a lot. It's really hard to keep a job in college basketball in any place for an extended period of time. He's been, at Clemson for like 16 years or 20 years, something stupid like that.
This is 15th season at Clemson. He's gone to the tournament 4 times, going to be 5 this year. He has every time he's been seeded 6 or higher, he's gone to the Sweet 16. And yeah, he's been able to keep a job at Clemson for as long as he's had in a recruiting area. To your point, which kind of helped convince me, was in an area where he's having to deal with NC State. He's having to deal with South Carolina. On top of that, Duke and North Carolina are right there. Wake Forest is right there. It's not an easy place to build your program, and he's able to kind of fight with the big boys and build a somewhat consistent power at Clemson. He's only been ranked outside the top 100 once to finish the year. It was his only losing season in his third year, and then he's been able to kind of build it up and gone to the Elite Eight last year. And I think it'd be a risky move, but definitely a guy who should be considered and interviewed. It's not
Well, again, when
necessarily
you
my pick to
yeah, again, it wouldn't be a sexy hire, but when you start looking at okay, whose situation would improve coming to Indiana, it's like when you look at the NIL backing, when you look at the fan base, when you like look at the opportunities you get as the Indiana basketball head coach, like it's just it's just a completely different stage of care and of just it just means more to be involved with Indiana basketball than it is with Clemson basketball. Clemson fans would tell you that. Like Clemson is a football school, will be a football school, will always be a football school. And while Indiana is developing football and doing a really good job of it, which is why we even have this show in the first place, in 49 other states it's just basketball.
yeah, I think
So
a big reason why Brownell is kind of because he is kind of the Chris Collins type, and I just said that the best Chris Collins type is Chris Collins. So I think a big reason why he's at 8 right now is the recency bias. He has a lot of momentum. You bring him in, it's like, oh, they just got the Clemson guy who just went to the Elite Eight. I think there's just a little more punch to it if you were to announce a Brunell hire over a Chris Collins hire, even though if you took away last year, probably Chris Collins is a little bit more qualified than Brad Brunell. So that's how I'd swing it, and hence why he's 8, right next to Chris Collins.
number 7, here's where the tier kind of switches a little bit. I would qualify anybody at 7 and up to be a home run hire. Brad, you can kind of give your thoughts on TJO in a second, but it was kind of odd, and Time noted this on Twitter today in a little bit of a thread, but TJ Otzelberger, head coach of Iowa State, signed a new extension on January 1st, although people were tweeting about the public details of the contract today like it had just happened. Potentially that could be signaling that they're reworking that deal even further. But TJO's buyout is like $4 million. So it's like that's not going to be a deterrent for a school that paid Archie Miller $10 million to go away. But like I said, current head coach of Iowa State, he sat on the bench at Iowa State, was associate head coach, known recruiter, coached the Jackrabbits up at South Dakota, makes the tournament all the time. Like along with Dusty May, who's also on this list, he is the youngest head coach on this list, and he's just a rising superstar. And if you can get him out of Ames, Iowa, that would be a huge, huge, huge hire.
And something tells me you can get him out of Ames, Iowa. And I kind of agree with you in the sense that I think there's a clear gap between the resumes of the top 6 and the resumes of the 4 that we've mentioned so far. I think of the 4, obviously TJO is by far the biggest home run. He had a lot of success at South Dakota State with Mike Daum, who was probably the best player in that conference at 6'10" forward. If you want to watch some really good, face up big highlights, I'd watch some Mike Daum. And then he goes to UNLV and kind of, super mediocre. He's basically he's 1 game below 500 in 2 years at UNLV, and somehow gets elevated to the Iowa State job. They see the potential. They took a chance on him. He's gone to the He has gone to the tournament every year, and he has one of the best teams in the country this year, a team that is in contention to make a run in the tournament. I'm a big fan of Iowa State. I don't care how poorly they've played lately, but I'm very high on them. A lot of guys coming back from last year, and they're built to make a run, which, feels like this is kind of the team. So it might be a good time for him to leave regardless of what happens after this year unless they win a national title. Then he's probably there for life.
Yeah, again, a lot of the sell for Indiana is going to be that they're going to provide a bigger platform and a bigger NIL budget to be able to build out a roster. So if you're somebody like TJ Otzelberger, are you seeking that stage? Is that where you want to be? Do you want to be in a Power 2 conference? Do you want to coach on one of the biggest brands in college basketball? If so, like, you're getting a pay raise, you're getting facility upgrades, everything's going up. So it's like, does he want it? Becomes the question.
Yeah, I think, and UNLV is a pretty big brand, so to take that job's a big deal. So clearly he likes the idea of like coaching at a brand, and okay, I'm gonna go from UNLV, I'm gonna go to the Big 12. Doesn't really matter which school it is, and then kind of feels like his next step would be Indiana. I think he's definitely someone we should talk about a lot because of the 7 that you say would be home run hires. He is by far, I think, the most attainable and the most likely to take the job.
He is not the most attainable.
Okay, he's the most likely to accept the job.
He's
there's
the
guy.
guy
It's tough because there's a guy who's not a sitting coach on the list, and
I was
even
here.
though
I'll
one
say
of the
this.
criteria is sitting head coach. So of the sitting head coaches that are on the list, he is the most attainable.
I would say this too. Of the guys on this list, he is the one who can act like he's the one guy who's a tier below in terms of like where Iowa State is compared to the rest of the coaches on this list. Like Iowa State and Indiana, no matter how bad Indiana is at basketball, Indiana basketball will always be a bigger brand than Iowa State. And so no matter how successful he's been there recently, like he is the lowest ranked guy in this list that you could argue is absolutely taking a promotion by going to Indiana.
Yeah, I think that's the point I'm trying to make. I think you said it more eloquently than me. So we'll go with that.
I like it. You want to take number 6?
Who is number 6? Bruce Pearl, my guy. This is the guy who I wanted Indiana to hire when Mike Woodson was hired. This is my number 1 when that whole thing was going down. And since that hiring, he hasn't gotten out of the second round. But he's gone to the tournament every year as the number 1 team in the country right now. And this team is poised to break through just based on their lack of success. I think they're a lot more hungry than a lot of these teams out here. And I think Auburn's poised to make a run. He's won everywhere he's been. He was at Tennessee for 6 years and took him to the tournament every year. He took Milwaukee to the Sweet 16. That's how he got the Tennessee job in the first place. So he won a national championship at Southern Indiana, correct? And yeah, he's very, very overqualified for this job, and I think it'd be a home run, and I think they'd win right away. And yeah, clearly in terms of resume, a big step up from TJO, where it's more of a risk. Now we're in the territory where these are basically sure things in our minds, or at least for me. From Bruce Pearl up on this list, this is basically like sure thing. It's gonna work. If it fails, it's really gonna be on the school.
100%. No, every one of these guys, Pearl included, would require significant legwork, and I would guess significantly more money to pry away from their school than a TJO or anybody below. But Pearl, in terms of resume, like he crushes everything. He's the winningest coach on the list in terms of winning percentage. He competes for the SEC regular season title regularly. He's been to the Elite Eight. He's been to the Final Four. He has Indiana ties. He has a lot of respect for Bob Knight. He is, I believe, the oldest coach on this list, but at the same time, it doesn't look like he's slowing down anytime soon. He is already recruiting for the class of 2025 for Auburn, which would make me believe he probably isn't getting ready to leave. But at the same time, like it's with the transfer portal and with the way like modern college basketball works, like it's not that hard to flip a commitment. So like if Indiana decides that Bruce Pearl is their guy and they throw just the kitchen sink at him, it'll be really interesting to see what he says, because I've said in the past, Bruce Pearl has not been shy of his admiration for Indiana, of his admiration for Bob Knight. Like you said, he spent time in Southern Indiana. He has ties to the state. So like you're getting a guy who's proven at 3 different stops he can build tournament teams, build championship contenders, and compete for conference titles. And so, like you said, if any of the guys on this list above Pearl don't succeed or wouldn't succeed, it would probably be because of the school and not because of the coach. Because like he checks every box.
100%. And yeah, like I said, he's just a home run guy. He feels like a blue blood level head coach that's just for whatever reason is at Auburn. And I think it has something to do with some sort of NCAA violations that, yeah, apparently he invited Aaron Kraft, who never played for him, to a cookout, and he wasn't supposed to do that, and then he got in trouble for it because he like lied about it or something like that. But yeah, he got in trouble for something that didn't really affect him. In this day and age, and recruiting shouldn't really be too big of an issue for him.
Yeah, he the thing he got in trouble for was he invited Aaron Kraft to a cookout, and then he had the family lie about it. And
Yeah.
so, and then Tennessee's like, we can't touch this guy with a 10-foot pole. Like we gotta stay away. He can't be inviting people to cookouts and lying about it. What's going on here? So yeah, that's the whole Bruce Pearl thing. So it's like, could you argue conduct erases him from the list? I don't think so, but I'll hear it.
Yeah, Auburn clearly is benefiting from taking a chance on a guy who has a past with the NCAA. Just saying, obviously there's not many guys in this list that fit that billing, but there are guys out there like Todd Golden, Will Wade, that have had these histories that wouldn't be the worst thing to kind of take a look at to you know when you talk about the revival. I guess Todd Golden's kind of already at a place where he's getting a second chance, so it'd be better worth, I don't know, like a Will Wade, probably more attainable. But I mean, if you can get Bruce Pearl, get Bruce Pearl.
Yeah, I think Will Wade's a guy we didn't spend much time on who could be interesting maybe for a second big board or for like as more information comes out. But in terms of resume and in terms of what Indiana's looking for, it was kind of just things didn't line up. But the next guy on this list is probably one that would have everybody jumping up and down and might be the least likely of anybody in the top 5. That's Dusty May, current head coach of Michigan. Very publicly just signed a brand new extension. It brought his buy up from $5 million to a daunting $7.5 million. So again, here's the thing, and I was gonna say this when the TJO thing dropped too, and then I realized that the TJO thing happened on January 1st. So I was like, all right, maybe it isn't super relevant, but maybe it's a little relevant. They're talking about it now. Basically, everything Indiana was trying to avoid and delaying announcing Mike Woodson wasn't coming back next year is happening, which again isn't a bad thing. When you like every single coach that would be on that presumed short list is getting a new extension, and the buyout's going up. That being said, money was never going to be an issue for Indiana basketball. The most important thing is getting the right guy in here, and I don't think the powers that be are going to care whether it's $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, $15 million, $18 million. As long as it's the right guy, I think it's worth spending the money, and I think they would agree. But yeah, it is just interesting to see that a lot of these guys are now like the price is increasing slightly, and so these schools are going, yeah, like we're not gonna make the price so much that you won't have the conversation. But now it's just a little bit longer of a conversation. So I don't think like a TJO extension or a re-extension, unless that buyout number is like something stupid crazy, like $50 million, you know what I'm saying? Which it doesn't feel realistic at all. Like I don't think any of these buyouts are a deterrent, but there hasn't been any indication that Dusty May wants to leave Michigan. That being said, we can talk about Michigan basketball versus Indiana basketball and the history there and the call home, as May is the prodigal son, went to Indiana, was a bench manager under Bobby Knight, like made the Final Four with FAU, has Michigan in prime position to compete for a Big Ten title this year and make a deep tournament run, has shown he can recruit in the portal. Like it's just he doesn't have the sustained success.
He wants to come home. It's when you're a student, just think about when you were a student in Indiana. You go to a basketball game. I mean, he was literally a manager, so he had like front row seats. I mean, there's just no way he doesn't want to go. The only way he doesn't is just some sort of logistic. Like we just get outbidded by Michigan somehow, which I just don't see will happen. He's definitely like not as big of a sure thing. Like I think the biggest reason why he's above Pearl is because he's more attainable than Pearl, would you say?
Well, he's also
more
20.
attainable
He's
and
20 years
younger.
younger too.
Yeah, but his resume doesn't even touch Pearls. It took him 4 years. He's one of the younger guys on the list.
Well, no,
Granted, it took him
his
4
I would
years to
say
rebuild FAU. Then goes to 2 tournaments, including a Final Four in year 5 and 6. Now he's having a great year at Michigan in year 1. There's just a lot less to go off of in terms of success. But when you kind of look at it for what it is, you see a young hotshot coach kind of on the rise right now, and he has these Indiana ties. It almost makes sense for him to kind of keep the momentum going at his alma mater.
100%. And I think when you look at obviously the volume between May and Pearl, you can't compare it. Pearl was coaching before May could walk. But when you look at their success in the tournament and you look at their ability to make deep runs in the tournament, it's like they've both been to one Final Four. And so
That's not true. Yeah.
if you're going to look at the two coaches, Dusty May's 48 and Bruce Pearl's 64, and you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to give one guy the shot to win a title. It's like the younger guy is probably a better bet given he's got more shots at it, hypothetically. You know what I'm saying?
But it's dangerous to kind of evaluate only like tournament success as the tiebreaker because I mean Bruce Pearl's been to way more first round, second rounds, Sweet 16s, Elite Eights. Like he's been to more than Dusty May. So
no, you're absolutely right. I think it's a very interesting argument. I think that's why they're 5 and 6 on this list because they are interchangeable. It's like, do you want the young hotshot who is like you could bring him home to like see if he's the guy who can do it, or do you want the proven scrappy veteran like looking for his last stop and final shot? So it's like what kind of in those two, it's like what's your cup of tea? Do you like that grizzled vet, or do you want the upside like where could this go type of play? I personally enjoy betting on upside, especially when the short-term production, if you're going to look at the last 3 years, is very similar. But at the same time, like if somebody's going to have a 30-minute argument for Bruce Pearl over Dusty May, like I'll listen to it.
Yeah. I think you nailed it right on the head. Like it really is just like what are you looking for? Are you looking for a little bit younger, or are you going to look for the guy that's done it before and can do the job? Or are you going to take the chance on the young hotshot that you're feeling very confidently can do the job, but can, in theory, flop, in theory? But
yeah,
I think
Bruce Pearl
Dusty May has
definitely
way
more
more
of a short
upside.
thing.
Way more upside because he'll be there for longer. And obviously, as we know from doing all this research, the longer you have a coach there, the more likely you are to have, success in the future. So continuity. Who builds up the best for continuity in the future? It's going to be Dusty May,
which is why he's 5. And now, recent information that has been brought to light has me questioning where we've ranked this next gentleman. But obviously, Brad, you're a huge fan of this man, so I'll let you take the reins on Mick Cronin.
Yeah, number 4, Mick Cronin. He is 13 straight NCAA tournaments between Cincinnati and UCLA, a streak that ended this past year due to a lack of NIL budget that forced UCLA to basically build a team comprising of 7 European freshmen and only had 1 scholarship senior on the roster, and he was a big that really didn't play that much, and has been able to turn it around in 1 year with NIL money to become a contender for not only the Big Ten but also, in my opinion, the national title. When Mick Cronin took over the UCLA basketball program, I alluded to this earlier, it was a rebuild that was coming off of Steve Alford, where he was somewhat consistently going to the NCAA tournament, but at the end of the day, his teams would, based on the expectations, underachieve, which is maybe not necessarily the case of Woodson, but he is underachieving based on what his expectations are. So despite going to potentially 3 tournaments in 4 years, it does still feel like his team's underachieved based on, how much, stars are next to their name. Do I think those guys are actually 4 or 5 stars? That's for you to figure out. But my point is that Mick Cronin was kind of able to turn around a similar situation at a blue blood already kind of happening where there was a lot of turmoil. So many people want Steve Alford fired. He was able to kind of catapult that, build a system in his own way. It's either you play defense or you sit on the bench. That's how it goes. And it was a tough, I think they started about 7 and 8 8-9 in their first 17 games or so, losing to Hofstra, Cal State Fullerton, and then they end that season on a 11-3 run and put themselves in a position for a tournament before the season gets canceled. Right, that very next year, kind of similar situation, had a kind of they lost some guys from that team, but Tyre Campbell and Jaime Jaquez going into their sophomore year, they're kind of able to start clicking toward the end of it. Throughout the whole season, they end on a little 3-game, 4-game losing skid, including the Pac-12 tournament, and then they kind of lock in and make their run to the Final Four and lose on a buzzer beater in a season where you have to think what could have been, and obviously that leads to 2 more Sweet 16 appearances where they were very hindered by key injuries, specifically Jalen Clark, which kind of prevented them from making as deep of a run as they wanted to in those 2 years, where they were actually really looking to win a national title in those 2 years, which is why those guys kind of stuck around as long as they did. But injuries kind of stopped them, and it's just a guy his resume is probably the best on this list that doesn't include a national title, straight up, without the national title. And I think a point I made in the article multiple times was that how often does lightning strike twice? There's only there's only been 13 head coaches that have won 2 national titles. Only one has won at multiple schools. That's Rick Pitino. So the idea that, when we talk about these guys in the future that have won a national title, what are the odds that these guys are going to win at another place? Like, with that being said, guys that win titles typically don't leave their schools, so that might have something to do with that fact. But can lightning strike twice at multiple schools? I don't know. It's really hard to do. Like I said, continuity is very, very, very important, and that applies to the coach and where they're located as well. So I think Mick Cronin's a guy where you're going to know what you're going to get, and it's going to work. You might not like it, but they're going to win. He spells fun, W-I-N. So that's that's an exact quote. So he's very similar to kind of Cygnar, I win, Google me kind of mentality. So I think there'd be a natural good fit just thinking of the coaches of Indiana. I just see Mick Cronin and Cygnar, and I just put a little smile on my face. Like, this 2 hard-nosed guys, like, coaching, bringing Indiana sports back, basically. Them 2 and Yeakley on the on the Mount Rushmore.
I'll devil's advocate Cronin for a second before I come back around on him, because I do like a lot of the points you make about him. And when, like, you're right, when you look at his resume, what he was able to do at Cincinnati, what he was able to do like early and often at UCLA, he builds his programs the way he wants, and he really doesn't give a shit what anybody else says about him. So much so to the fact that he just openly fights with his administration. He calls out the fans. He's calling out the NIL and the funding and things like that. And it's like, yeah, all those are good stuff when you're at a place that doesn't have a lot of turmoil. When you take that type of attitude into Indiana, a place that's dealing with a lot of issues already, and instead of being a problem solver, you're almost a problem creator, I could see that creating a lot of problems. Like, especially if they don't win early, which is very possible under Mick Cronin teams, because, like you're saying, that you're in for a rebuild, and it is what it is. And I don't think anybody at Indiana is sitting here saying that they wouldn't take a rebuild if it was with the right guy. But I think there are some things Cronin does and has gotten comfortable doing that wouldn't play in Bloomington, that he's been allowed to, I wouldn't say get away with, because I don't think they're really negative things, but just kind of in terms of what the next head coach needs to do in terms of unifying the fan base, I'm not sure Cronin is going to even entertain that.
Entertain what? Oh, what people like trying to tell him what to do?
I don't. No. I don't think he's going to care whether or not he's not going to care whether or not the fans.
At 53 years old, still young, he is the youngest coach in history to get to 500 wins. Youngest coach ever to get to 500 wins. He's not going to care what you think. He's just not. And honestly, I think that's perfect for Indiana. I think a guy that will just tell you all these burners on, like, the the bad ones, like not the burner verse, but like the fucking Rick Bob 103 with like a who I'm talking about.
I know we know who you're talking about.
He's gonna tell them to go fuck themselves, and I think that in of itself is perfect because we act like this stuff, like all this social media stuff, these message boards, they only happen at Indiana. I promise you, there's guys at UCLA that want him fired right now for no reason. All the guy does is win, and they want him fired. It's ridiculous. So the idea that he'll be somewhat, I
Divisive.
the reason why, well, I guess the reason why I don't think it'll be a problem is because I think he's right. So I don't think like what you say does not matter compared to what he thinks. I think he's like one. I think he's top five head coach of college basketball right now. I think it'd be a home run hire.
Do you think it's a positive or a negative? He has an existing relationship / quote friendship with the Hoosier Hysterics.
At first, I considered it a negative, obviously, because it's just the distaste of the Hoosier Hysterics and what they've done with access to the program and things like that. But thinking about it a little deeper, like since they do have that pre-existing relationship, could make things a little bit easier in terms of, the type of stuff that gets out there, right? Mick might have more control than maybe a Woodson had. Is kind of my counterpoint.
I like it. I like that counterpoint. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, but I kind of I like your slant about it, and I think that's what I'm gonna adopt.
Yeah, it's not the worst slant, and I also like he's so qualified. It's not even funny. Does he leave UCLA? I don't know, man. He's got a core of 8 guys coming back. Half of them are from LA, and he's got the 7'3" center that has 2 more years of eligibility after this year. He's not leaving without the big fella. So it just depends. I think the big fella is going to make that decision for him. Like if he comes to the big fella like, hey, I'm thinking of going to Bloomington. Would you go to Bloomington with me? If he says no, and he's like, oh wait, I guess I'm staying. I'm not leaving without the big fella. So I think it's kind of a package deal, and we'll see. I think Mick's definitely a type of guy that I think will float it to his players because I think he'd want his guys to kind of come with him. Would be how I think he approaches it. So it'll be interesting if that's somehow a possibility because I think he'll be able to convince players they'll be able to get more money through NIL at Indiana than at UCLA, which is a big reason why there's a lot of beef. If you don't know, there's a lot of beef between UCLA athletics and the UC regions. Basically, that since they've left for the Big Ten, they've gotten really upset because Cal Berkeley is actually their trademark school. So the idea that UCLA, which is considered a second, it's like UAB going to the SEC, basically, and Alabama's in the Sun Belt, basically. It's kind of how it kind of is in terms of like where they are at its institutions. But at the end of the day, UCLA has just always been a more successful athletics program. So they've just been, there's a lot of beef and a lot of money lost that UCLA has to give up because of that deal. And I think it's a long-term hindrance that I think annoys Mick Cronin, which I think could give him an out in terms of his mind taking the job because he knows he can go anywhere and be successful. So it's really just about like, can I bring the big fella? Like, I think that's what it comes down to. Like, can I bring a Mata?
You think Mara is that important? Or Mata?
Yeah, I think him having his guys going to a new school, especially at a place like Indiana where how many guys are coming back next year? Renew, Cubs, Newton, Carlisle, Rice, maybe Mbako. I don't know. I think they got a couple freshmen coming in. They'll be fine.
Zarna,
I think
he's committed.
I think he'd want to bring some of his guys just because there's so many guys on that UCLA team that will be coming back, and he's gonna have to play those guys if they all stay. Like he doesn't want to have to all of a sudden have to game plan for 7'3" developed a Mata. He doesn't want to have to all of a sudden deal with that. So I think there's taking a guy from a blue blood to a blue blood. Do I think it's somewhat realistic? Yes. It's definitely a possibility, but there's just a lot of factors. Ton. It's risky for him to leave. It just is, even though I think he kind of wants to.
Intriguing.
Yeah.
Very, very intriguing.
Yeah.
The number 3 guy on our list is Nate Oates.
It's kind of like the Dusty May to Pearl is like the Cronin to Dusty, like Nate Oates. It's kind of like the same thing, like younger, less accomplished. Both Mick Cronin and Nate Oates have, like, Nate Oates has a better resume than Dusty May, and Mick Cronin has a better resume than Bruce Pearl. So it's kind of like the next tier up of what that kind of relationship is. Like, do we take
I
Nate
don't know if
Oates
you could say
and Mick
that.
Cronin? Do you know who know? What do you mean?
I don't think you could look at Mick Cronin's resume and say it's better than Bruce Pearl's. Bruce Pearl's got the most wins on the list.
Bruce Pearl also missed the tournament way more often than Mick Cronin.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you could say it's definitively better. I'll give you
Same
in
amount of
that
Final
he
Fours.
did it. He did it faster. But continue. Sorry.
He
Continue.
also did it at Tennessee, at Cincinnati, not Tennessee.
Yeah.
A little bit different there. I'm not. Cincinnati has great basketball tradition, but they just don't have the money like Tennessee did. They just don't. But yeah, Nate Oates, for the record, Mick Cronin, I think, is undefeated against Nate Oates, for whatever that's worth. But I do like Nate Oates above Mick Cronin just because, to that point, like the hot shot, if we can get him, this is probably one of the hottest names in college basketball right now. It's clear as day. Former high school coach. He had Buffalo as a 6th seed. Just think about that for a little bit. Buffalo was good enough to be a 6th seed. They were really good, and yeah, he's that level of coach, able to elevate a program like that to that level is something really you don't see too often, ever. So obviously a hot name. Does he leave Alabama? I don't know. Definitely, as a basketball guy, gotta imagine he kind of maybe likes the idea of coaching Indiana basketball more than Alabama basketball, but just because there's a clear like one's for football, one's for basketball. It's kind of how the perception is, historically. So yeah, we'll see what he does there.
Yeah, Oates is probably the least attainable guy on this list. He has an $18 million buyout that's reported. I'm sure if there starts to be rumblings that Indiana's snooping around, that number even gets negotiated up. But I think when you start to look at the parameters and you say, okay, cool, who is the best slash, like when you try and cross that like best slash realistic like threshold, it's like, no, like Matt Painter is unrealistic. Phenomenal coach, unrealistic. Dan Hurley, phenomenal coach, unrealistic. But then you look at Nate Oates and it's like the argument you just made. Historically, Indiana is a significantly more important basketball program than Indiana. Recent history wouldn't tell you that, but like Nate Oates is 50 years old. So it's like when he was growing up and as a teacher in Detroit coaching high school basketball in the Midwest, it's like, yeah, you can see how the Indiana brand would be attractive to these guys. Like 4 regular season conference titles, 7 of 9 tournaments made, winning record in the NCAA tournament, coming off a Final Four, can recruit, keeps his guys at school. Like the story of how he got the Buffalo head coaching position was that Bobby Hurley took the Arizona State job and basically told the administration, if you don't hire this guy, I'm taking him with me. All of the players wanted him, and like it's just like the stories you hear about Nate Oates are the stories you want to hear about a basketball coach. And it's like when you're at the highest level, when money's not an issue, you look at the guy who's got the biggest price tag. There you go.
Yeah, he's actually 7 for 8. 2020 didn't count, so he has a much better tournament percentage than people let on. Here's a funny stat. Woodson's about to go maybe 3 for 4 at Indiana tournament appearances. He did that at Buffalo, 3 for 4, 2 tournament wins. He did end up losing to the eventual runner-ups, Texas Tech, Chris Beard, Texas Tech, back in 2019 when they were the 6th seed in a very, very competitive game. I mean, just the idea that he could be at a place like Indiana and be able to be maybe a launch pad to what Woodson's kind of setting up here, very similar to what I think could happen at Mick Cronin. I think will happen with Nate Oates, except Nate Oates will be a lot more fun to listen to, or not listen to watch, and they'll be very high scoring. They've had some good defensive teams in the past, but typically his teams lean more offense, which is great to see. But the ones that are able to kind of hone in on the defensive end tend to kind of figure it out. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with Nate Oates. Would love to have him, but I don't know how attainable it is at all. 18 mil's a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna say highly, highly, highly doubtful, even if they match the number, just because if you're unless you really want to leave if you're Nate Oates, I gotta let Mookie out real quick. But unless you really want to leave if you're Nate Oates, then like why? Like even if the money's the same, why would you leave a program you already built up? But I know the aggregators are gonna come out for number two, so you want to tell the people about Tony Bennett?
Yeah, yeah, I'll talk about Tony Bennett. Um, yeah, I think I'm one of the aggregators just because he's like so like if we're gonna go that route, I'd say might as well go Mick Cronin, but he's rated two because he's won a national title, saying it similar with the guy who's gonna be ranked at number one. And yeah, it's a guy that was able to get Washington State to 2 straight years of being seeded in the top four seed line at when they didn't have Klay Thompson. They had Aaron Baines. It's just some like you don't do that at Washington State. It doesn't really happen unless you have a Klay Thompson, or a Tony Bennett in this case. And obviously he was able to turn around Virginia in a rebuild and eventually win the national title. Back to my point, does lightning strike twice for a guy like Tony Bennett? I think we'll be competitive and stuff like that, but we talk about Banner Six all the time. I don't know if he's the guy that puts us in contention for that, more so than maybe a Nate Oates or Mick Cronin, Dusty May. I'll even throw Bruce Pearl into that. It's his style of play was kind of the perfect combination because he had great scorers like DeAndre Hunter and Kyle Guy on his team, and Key Clark couldn't miss. And so it was just kind of the perfect storm with the type of ball that they played that they kind of just ran the table and they were very focused coming off an embarrassing 16 seed loss the previous year. I think that had a big reason. When that happens, think about that offseason and how serious that stuff they're going to take that. So yeah, it resulted in a national title. Like I said, these tournament runs they kind of result into a perfect concoction. I don't think they win the national title without losing to UMBC. I really don't. So it's kind of like these title runs, you got to take him with a grain of salt. Like obviously he's super accomplished, but is he a better coach than Mick Cronin and Nate Oates? I have my doubts.
Well, and I think in talking Tony Bennett, you have to acknowledge some of the faults here. So I'm going to do that. But I think what brought Tony Bennett so far up the list was both the championship and the fact that he's not coaching anywhere. And I think also to build the case for him a little bit is that like Indiana is clearly fond of the style of coaching and the style of basketball he plays. They hired his clone. They tried to hire Tony Bennett in 2017. It just didn't work out. But when you have the actual Tony Bennett, who can recruit to the level of conference he's in and then implement his own system, it becomes really interesting. The guy was highly successful in the regular season. Yes, his team plays a very boring style of basketball, almost a grind your teeth style of basketball. But very similar to what you said about Mick Cronin, like how do you spell fun? WIN. Like the guy wins games.
That's
Six
Mick, that's
ACC
Mick
regular
Cronin's
season
line.
conference. Yeah,
Mick
six
Cronin's
ACC
teams play offense.
6 ACC regular conference titles coaching against Roy Williams and Coach K. He has a tournament win. He's shown the ability to bounce back from adversity. It's like if playing aesthetically pleasing basketball is one of the criteria, then Tony Bennett can't be on the list. But that's not one of the criteria. The criteria is win and win consistently, and that's all the guy does. And he's not coaching right now. And the biggest reason why he gave up coaching was because it was a shit show running NIL. And guess what? Between Hoosiers Connect and the relationships Indiana has with donors and just the general legislation and wording and time people have had to adapt to NIL, it just the landscape looks completely different. Couple that with the structure at Indiana, and it's like NIL is not a problem. Also, Indiana's most definitely going to bring in a GM, probably for basketball. The reasons why he walked away aren't as significant as they were when he walked away. So it's like, cool, if you're Tony Bennett and you're going to try and get back into coaching, like how do you go up from Virginia?
Indiana. Is this my pick? No, but he's definitely number two on the list. He's second most qualified. He has that championship. But like to my point, championships kind of come with a collective, a special group of people with, special circumstances. And things that just happen. And yeah, I think things just fell perfectly for Tony Bennett. And yeah, I think it would work at Indiana. But do I think he'll get his banner six? No. So for that reason, I'm out. But I think I would be happy with the hire. I think I would be happy with anyone in the top seven.
I don't know. I think 2 or 3 weeks into Tony Bennett's first year, when they're just clamping people and they're undefeated in the hall and they're a top 10 team in the country, and it just looks like a Tony Bennett basketball team, that nobody's going to care that it's 50-48 or 66-30.
I'll tell you who won't be on that Tony Bennett team. Kenzie Mbako. He won't be on that team. No.
All right, number one on the list, and by far the best, most qualified. Pick anybody in the country, one shot, no matter what. They say yes. If I had my choice, it'd be Scott Drew.
I agree. The rebuild at Baylor's unprecedented. A program with zero history, going into, getting sanctioned and going through all these NCAA violations, a lot of drug dealing, murders happening at Baylor. Basketball is a crazy situation for him to take. And he was able to rebuild that team. I think year 5, he went to the Elite Eight. Obviously, I think that was his first tournament appearance with the team, but he's clearly been known to make deep runs in the tournament. So in that sense, like countering my own point, like he does have tons of tournament success without necessarily having that, consistent tournament run. But like with Chris Collins, you got to understand the circumstances. Like he's at Baylor. I'd say that at the time, worse situation than any point in Northwestern's career. And he's able to turn that around all the way to a championship team, coming out with great players over the years. Quincy Acey, Jared Butler, Davion Mitchell, those teams. I mean, it's a clear number one. He's been at that place for so long. It's kind of at a point where it's like, man, would he leave? Like I always reference the Roy Williams. Obviously, Roy Williams had his North Carolina ties, which I don't know how comparatively to Scott Drew's Indiana ties, how strong they compare, but he left Kansas for the North Carolina job. I mean, Baylor is not Kansas, so it's just not out of the realm of possibility for me for him to leave after doing his part 20 plus years. The problem is that he is Baylor basketball. It'd be super weird to see him at a different place, but I would love it to be Indiana. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, you brought it up a little bit, but his dad, Homer Drew, coached Valpo forever. He coached Valpo for a year. His brother, Bryce, has a very famous NCAA tournament shot you made me watch the other day. Like this is the definition of the call home. And like you said, you have somebody who is the definition of Baylor basketball. He's also been there for 20 years. It's like he's won conference titles. He won an NCAA tournament. It's like go chase for the second title, I guess. But it's like, what more is there to do at Baylor besides just like run back a great team every year? And if you get into that position, you're just, I don't want to call it bored, but like if you're looking for a challenge and you're looking for something like a legacy defining moment, and like if you honestly want to chase greatness, like you have to jump at this opportunity, because if you can be the guy to turn around Indiana basketball, like you're going to be a legend forever. And make that somebody from the state with ties from the state who cared about it before it was even a profession. Like, yeah, I mean, it's checking all the boxes Dolson's looking for. It's checking all the boxes the fans are looking for. Like, and that's somebody who would come in and it's like the fan base would get behind. It's like, okay, we're in a rebuild, but the right guy's running it. And then on top of that, he's a proven winner, and he's won a title in the last 5 years, and he plays a really exciting brand of basketball. It's like, yes. Check.
Yeah.
If it's at all a possibility, and obviously, or not so obviously, Indiana has hired Turnkey, the same search firm they used for the Curt Cignetti search. They're going to help Indiana in this basketball search as well. And so I'm sure on any short list that anybody puts together, that if there are any rumblings that Scott Drew is interested, he's going to be on it.
100%. It's funny because he has like a lot of the similar like ties to Indiana that like a Brad Stevens has. Like it's really not that far off. Like Indiana natives, coached at an Indiana school at one point. Like that's really like the two ties, and they're the only ties Brad Stevens has, and went to an Indiana school like for university, but not Indiana. Like it's kind of like the same thing as Brad Stevens, except one isn't the GM for the Boston Celtics. One is actively coaching college basketball right now. It's almost like, we were talking about Brad and we should have been talking about Scott the whole time. And it's, yeah, feels, yeah, it just feels eerily similar to like the level of coach. Obviously, Brad Stevens had tremendous success coaching in the NBA on the Celtics. Not saying Scott Drew's capable of the same thing, but he's clearly able to qualify for the Indiana job. So it almost be as great as getting Brad Stevens in my mind. It is kind of the level where I'd put Scott Drew at.
Yeah, I agree. And then when you take into account that like Stevens has been out of the college game since 2013, and in that span, Scott Drew has won a championship, it's like you could almost argue it would be a better hire.
Almost, except I think Brad Stevens is somehow younger.
Yeah, as I say, you could. I said almost. But when we're talking realistic, and the other thing I wanted to say, because you can't bring up an Indiana coaching search without talking about Brad Stevens. And while I am under the impression that those phone calls were made, I saw a couple things that kind of tweaked my thinking about him. Is like I could see Indiana reaching out to Brad Stevens not to gauge his interest in coaching the position, but to gauge to get inside the basketball mind and just kind of talk to him about different guys in the space, different potential guys to be the GM, rising stars in the coaching ranks, maybe not head coaches, but like our friend Coach Pundit last night was throwing up Luke Murray, who's an assistant coach for UConn, apparently like a high-level recruiter and like responsible for bringing a lot of their guys in. And it's like I started off our kind of search talking about finding the next Marcus Freeman from 2021, the guy who's the Notre Dame defensive coordinator ready to be the next head coach. And so like even if Indiana's going to go outside the box for somebody like that, I think getting the perspective of arguably the best basketball mind in the sport is never a bad thing, especially somebody who you have a relationship with and has ties to the school. So I won't definitively say what that phone call to Stevens was about. I'm not even ready to say they spoke to him about taking the job, but maybe they spoke to him about other people who could. So I don't know, but I think there was contact there at least. So
There needs to be. Because if you're going to call him about potentially even taking the job, might as well just get his advice on it. Bill Self actually is a Oklahoma State alum, and he's been publicly on the record saying every time they've hired a head coach, I've gotten the phone call from them, and I've given them my piece of my mind and kind of my advice and what I would look for and my perspective on things, and I'll give them names and things. Like, yeah, when you have these relationships, like, yeah, you're gonna help. You're gonna. It's not no skin off. Definitely no skin off Brad Stevens. More so Bill Self helping out in conference. Like that's kind of crazy. Like Bill Self's literally out of the college ranks. Like why not? He'd probably take a call from a lot of different schools, not just Indiana.
yeah, but yeah, we're like we said, you can play the speculation game all you want. You could dive into stats. You could try and turn over all the quotes. You can join the Trilly Discords. You could be on peaks.com. At the end of the day, it's far too early in the process to really have any type of concrete information about it, which is why it's both fun to speculate and talk about, to see what like the different reasons for and against different candidates. And then, but ultimately everybody's going to end up with the same list. And in 5 to 7 weeks, we'll probably all have a really good idea of who it's going to be. But yeah, we'll be following along with it. But that's kind of our thoughts on, if we were provided the guidelines, this is kind of where we would look first.
Yeah, if I had to speculate right now, like, because it usually comes down when you do it right, like, it comes down to like kind of a final three that you're actively, talking to and maybe even taking the job. I think it'd be great. I like the idea of what Luke Miller, the UConn guy, and then Luke Murray.
Yeah,
And
Bill
Ben
Murray's
McCollum.
son.
I think they'll get calls. I don't know if they're necessarily going to make the final three. If I had to take a wild guess, I think our three would be made up of guys on our list. I think it'd come down to TJO, Mick Cronin, and calling my shot here, Brad Burnell. I think those would be the final three. I think Mick Cronin will be taking discussions, but I think he'll still be on the fence on whether he'll take the job. But I think he'll be more open to it than most people at where he's at, right? If that makes sense. I don't know what that buyout looks like. I'm sure it's nothing like Alabama's, but um, yeah, that's if I had to call my shot, that's what I think the final three would end up being. If I had to guess. No,
Yeah,
I'll swap out Cronin for Dusty May, and then I think it's going to end up being Dusty May. That's my prediction for the head coaching search. I think
yeah,
Dusty
no,
May wants to come. I really do. It's
it just feels like the fit makes too much sense, and it just feels like if Indiana is truly his dream job, then like Michigan is not going to be enough. Like 1 year of success at Michigan where you're going to have to turn around and rebuild your senior heavy team again is not going to be enough to keep you there.
yeah, it's like because I've been a skeptic for Dusty May throughout this whole like process ever since it's been discussed Woodson might leave since like last year, just between like my IU inner circles and things like that, and obviously Dusty May gets brought up all the time, and for me, I always saw it as a big risk, but just seeing what he's done in his first year at Michigan, I think that's a good enough kind of tryout to prove that he's ready for the Indiana job, and I think Indiana will be ready to pull the trigger, and I think he'll gladly accept. I think I think that's the most realistic option on the list, is what I
I'm going
would
to be
say.
honest with you. I think that's where my head goes too. It feels like that just makes the most sense. Like he just seems like. At the same time, though, it's like, are you going to take a job and then leave after a year? So it's like that's my only like really major holdup. Then are you going to go out of your way to renegotiate your contract? Well, yeah, they're going to pay you more money. So it's like, but at the same time, it's like he just makes the most sense. Like he just makes the most sense.
I just know that's where his heart is, so it'll just be curious to see where he ends up. So
That being said, I'm not ready to predict it at all, and I don't think I'll be able to predict it until they announce it, which is why it's so exciting.
yeah, 100%.
Any closing thoughts on the big board?
No, no, we're almost at March, so it's time to really like get this not a big board out of the way and really hone in on hoops, which is probably the most important thing, right? So, like I said, core four, let's limit Mbako minutes, but choose our spots. Like if we're down and we need some scoring bad, like I don't hate throwing him in, but or maybe if we're up to keep the scoring on. I don't know what the best way to do it. I'm not a fucking coach, so. Uh, I just say, I think we figured out a lot of things against Purdue. I think keeping that rotation very similar to how it was with against Purdue will be very vital moving forward in terms of like minute allocation and our success moving forward. Hope Renew comes back very soon though. Just obviously
Yeah,
with
the
Renew
Renew
with Renew being
situation.
hurt, Mbako has to play more. There's
Well,
no other option.
it's not. He wasn't hurt. It was like he was at shoot around. Then all of a sudden he came down with an illness. They had to send him to the ER, and we haven't seen an update on it either. And we've been potting for a little bit now, so I haven't checked Twitter in a little bit. But I didn't see anything all day regarding Malik. So hoping he's doing well and feeling better today, and hopefully it was just a scare. But anytime you involve the ER, it's definitely scary. So definitely praying for Renew and hoping he's doing all right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. They got to lock in. They have a
I
West
didn't even
Coast
know he
road
went to
trip.
the ER. That's crazy.
Yeah,
I
it
had
was
no
kind of
idea.
like Woods. It was almost like a thrown away. Like Woodson saying like at the end of the game he needed to get an update on him and he hadn't heard yet, and he just like mentioned he had been to the ER. I think he was home though, so I don't know if he stayed at the hospital. But at least after the game yesterday, Woodson still needed an update. But yeah, the Hoosiers go. They got Washington on Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, I believe. They have Oregon on Monday or Tuesday. Yeah, Oregon on Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and then they close the season at Assembly Hall
Well, they
against
got
Ohio
they
State.
got Washington over the weekend.
Yeah,
'Cause they got
Washington on
Washington's
Saturday.
Okay. Yeah, Washington tomorrow. Should take care of business there. Oregon's gonna be a tough one, and then Ohio State for all the marbles. That one's at home though, so really just gotta go. Make sure we go 2-1 there. Should be still in the bubble if we win out. Obviously, we're looking at a 10 seed maybe 10 seed swing. Um, But yeah, gotta take care of business and then get a dub in the Big Ten tournament, kind of lock things up. Even though
100%.
history says they really don't take into account tournament, just based on how the bubble's gone the past few years. Tournament play, conference tournament play, that is, really hasn't made too big of an impact on the final seedings. I'd say those regular season games are a lot more important. So let's take care of business now, lock us in, and do what we need to do to get in. I think if they go 2-1, they're in, which is crazy to say because I was so low on this team for so long. But if they win 2 out of the next 3, they're in. If they go 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3, we're not in a great spot to succeed.
We'll find out. We will find out. But yeah, and then real quick before we get out of here, we got some exciting things to announce. Brad and I, we can't say much yet. So yeah, that was kind of a tease, but I don't know if it's going to be the next show. I don't know if it's going to be the show after, but very soon Cigs Inside is going to look a little bit different. It's going to be coming from a different platform potentially. And yeah, we got some things in the works, so we'll know more about that soon, but some exciting things coming for Cigs Inside Season 2 and kind of the future for Brad and I and talking about Indiana football. So we're pumped about it, and like I said, when we have some more information, we'll be able to share it, but the future is bright. We're excited.
I'm excited. I'm pumped because we're going to be talking about basketball a lot more, and we'll be probably the Cigs Inside portion will be at this. Think of it as we're still Cigs Inside. We're just expanding what we're talking about. It's not just going to be Indiana football anymore. We're really going to be talking about Indiana athletics as a whole, and it's just really exciting. Obviously, Cigs Inside to its core is still going to be around, and we'll be talking about football every episode, but we'll be talking about some other things too. So that's just going to be really exciting, and you'll be able to see our beautiful faces potentially. So really, really pumped for it.
Yeah, we're going to have video, and we're also going to be live. So
That's cool.
There's that too.
That's cool.
So yeah, exciting stuff. But you can follow Cigs Inside, an Indiana football podcast, on Twitter at Cigs Inside Pod. You can follow Brad at Bradley_Loomis8. You can follow me at Alec Keyser. Check out keysportsnetwork.com. Brad's writing for Key Sports. I'm writing for Key Sports. You can check out the big board we discussed today, pinned to Key Sports Network. You can also check out the article I just wrote about the Hoosiers and the turnaround they've done in the last 2 weeks. Brad's got some LA baseball stuff. I know he's got, I think, a Utah hockey thing in the draft. So it's some interesting things coming from Key Sports Network. So keep an eye on the socials for that. And as always, shout out to the boys, Wave, NxckSkrxll, Cygnar. Check out Friends and Collaborators, Instrumental Volume 1 on streaming platforms now. The intro song, 1621. The outro song, The Sweet Sound of Butter Symphony. Spring ball is a few weeks away.
Exciting
Indiana
things
Hoosiers
coming up.
football is rolling.
Exciting things.
And Cigs Inside is evolving. We'll see you guys very soon.
See you guys.
Hoosiers.